Welcome everyone to another deep dive. My name is Alex and you are on the Classic Cars Roast channel. Today we're dissecting a real piece of work, the 1968 Mercury Marquis. If you thought the name Marquis sounded regal, prepare to be disappointed because this is less about royalty and more about a sad chapter in automotive history. The first generation Marquis came out in 1967 and you can already feel the malaise creeping in. When you think of a classic full-size car, you expect something with a punchy engine and a presence on the road, but the Marquis is like a punchline to a bad joke. The market for big iron is really heating up right now, and the Marquis is an oddball that's caught the attention of some collectors. Prices can range from $25,000 to $50,000, and that's only if you find a well-preserved example. But let's be real. The real shocker is that some of these cars fetch auction prices of upwards of $74,000 with mileage that would make a grandma's Sunday drive look like a NASCAR race. Think just a few thousand miles. It's absurd how this once-forgotten car is now treated like a diamond in the rough. What's the first impression when you lay eyes on this beast? The massive chrome bumpers scream excess, but the overall design has the elegance of a high school prom date. Flashy, but ultimately forgettable. The grille is distinctive with its horizontal bars, but trust me, it's hiding some serious flaws. And don't get me started on the interior. It's got that classic wood grain trim, but it feels more like a cheap imitation of luxury rather than the real deal. So, what about the power under the hood? The 1968 Mercury Marquis came with either a 428 cubic inch V8 or a pitiful 390 cubic inch V8. We're talking about a pathetic 190 horsepower SAE net. Yes, you heard that right. This car, with all its bulk, can barely muster the kind of power that would get a modern-day sedan out of bed before noon. For me, a car with that low of a horsepower rating is an immediate no, game over. And let's not forget the engineering compromises. The common issues with rust in the trunk pan and lower quarter panels are just the tip of the iceberg. The vacuum-operated headlamp doors? They're about as reliable as a politician's promise. If you're looking for something solid, this car might just crumble like a stale cookie. In the end, the 1968 Mercury Marquis is a reminder of how far we've fallen since 1970, the last great year for high-compression V8s. So, would you be willing to take a gamble on this luxury liner? All right, buckle up, because the creation story of the 1968 Mercury Marquis is a wild ride through the automotive landscape of the malaise era. Picture it, the late 1960s, and America is just starting to feel the weight of its own excess. The glorious days of high-compression V8s are dwindling, and the automotive gods are laughing as they watch manufacturers scramble for relevance. The Mercury Marquis, a high-end, full-size two-door hardtop, emerges from this chaos, but it's more of a half-hearted attempt at luxury than a true contender. So, what do we have here? The Marquis debuted in 1967, and by 1968 it was already feeling the pinch of a declining market. With a focus on comfort and style, Mercury threw in some gaudy chrome bumpers and a horizontal bar grille that screams, "Look at me!" But let's be real, that's just flashy makeup on a car that's starting to show signs of aging. It's like putting lipstick on a pig. Sure, it's still a pig. The concealed headlamps? Cool idea, but they were more about style than practicality. They often malfunctioned, leaving owners in the dark, literally. Talk about a bad first date. Now let's dive under the hood. The engine options were a mixed bag, with a mighty 428 cubic inch V8 pumping out a gross 340 horsepower. But wait, that's not the engine most buyers opted for. No, most settled for the pathetic 390 cubic inch V8, which wheezed out a measly 265 horsepower. I mean, seriously? A car this size should not be embarrassed at stoplights. With a compression ratio of just 8.0 to 1, the Marquis was already waving the white flag in the horsepower war. And let's not forget the turbo-hydromatic transmission, which is like comparing a lion to a house cat. The turbo-hydromatic 400 is the king of automatic transmissions, while the C6 is just a wannabe. Inside, the Marquis was decked out in leather or vinyl upholstery, with a dash that looked like it had been designed in a rush. The rectangular speedometer is a nice touch, but don't even get me started on the aging wiring harnesses and vacuum system issues. It's like Mercury wanted to give you a taste of luxury but forgot to check if the basics were functioning. Now, as the years rolled on, the Mercury Marquis became a forgotten relic, overshadowed by the likes of the Cadillac and Lincoln. It went from being a symbol of American luxury to just another face in the crowd. Is it any wonder that it's now fetching crazy prices at auction? With only so many left on the road, the brutal charm of the Marquis is starting to shine through, and collectors are finally waking up to its unique character. But for me, I can't help but wonder if the charm is enough to overshadow the flaws. Would you take the plunge on this one, or would you rather keep your money in your pocket? All right, folks, it's time to get our eyes on the exterior of the 1968 Mercury Marquis. And let me tell you, there's a lot to unpack here. First off, you can't ignore the sheer size of this beast. It's a full-size two-door hardtop, and it's got presence. But let's be real, just because it's big doesn't mean it's beautiful. The massive chrome bumpers are standard, and while they scream classic Americana, they also feel a bit overdone, like that guy at the party who just can't stop talking about his gym routine. It's flashy, sure, but is it truly classy? Now take a look at the grille design for 1968. The horizontal bar style with the Mercury logo is distinctive, but honestly it's just a little too much for my taste. It's like they knew they had to stand out in the market, so they threw together something that says, "Look at me," without really saying anything at all. And those vacuum-operated headlamps? Sure, they're a neat gimmick, but good luck when that system fails. You'll be left in the dark, literally. Moving on to the color options, you've got a palette that includes presidential blue metallic, Wimbledon white, and candy apple red, which all sound great on paper. But here's the kicker. These colors can't hide the build quality issues lurking underneath. Wherever you find a beautiful finish, you might just as easily find rust eating away at the trunk pan or those lower quarter panels. It's like a bad magic trick. Now you see it, now you don't. And let's not forget about the body lines. They're trying hard to evoke a sense of elegance, but they often fall flat. The lines feel a little too straight, a little too rigid. It's almost as if the designers were afraid to let loose, like they were trying to play it safe in a world that was all about excess. What's the point of having a car from the muscle car era if it doesn't embrace the muscle? In essence, the exterior of the 1968 Mercury Marquis is a mixed bag. It has its moments of boldness, but it often teeters on the edge of being gaudy. If I had to sum it up, I'd say it's a car that wants to be taken seriously, but sometimes leaves you scratching your head. Would I spend my hard-earned cash on this? Not a chance. The exterior may turn a few heads, but it won't win any hearts. All right, folks, now we're diving deep into the interior of the 1968 Mercury Marquis. And I'm telling you right now, it's a mixed bag of elegance and mediocrity. First off, let's talk about that dashboard. The rectangular speedometer is about as exciting as watching paint dry. Sure, it has wood grain trim accents, but let's not kid ourselves. This isn't a luxury yacht. It's just a desperate attempt to add a touch of class to what is otherwise a bland and uninspired design. Now, when you slide into the seats, you could have leather or vinyl upholstery, depending on how much you wanted to spend back in the day. The front split bench seats are standard, while the optional bucket seats might try to convince you you're in something sporty. Spoiler alert, you're not. The comfort level is somewhere between a plush sofa and an old park bench. If you're a big guy like me, you might find yourself squished in the name of luxury. And let's chat about that smell. You know what I'm talking about. The unique aroma of vintage cars. It's like a mix of aged leather and musty carpet. But here's the kicker. The smell often comes from decades of neglect, where the interior has been left to rot like an old sandwich. A clean, well-maintained interior can be charming, but you run the risk of uncovering a scent that could knock a buzzard off a gut wagon. Now, let's get to the options. You could have an optional tilt-away steering column, which, theoretically, sounds great. But in practice, you'll find that it's just another gimmick that adds complexity without delivering any real benefit. AM radio? Sure, if you want to listen to crackly tunes as you drive your behemoth down the road. And air conditioning? That's like the cherry on top of a very mediocre sundae, if it still works, that is. But the real kicker? All those electrical issues lurking around the headlamp door vacuum system and the aging wiring harnesses. You might think you're stepping into a classic ride, but you're really just signing up for a game of electrical roulette. So, when I look at the interior of the 1968 Mercury Marquis, I can't help but think, it's all style over substance. If you're into cars for the driving experience, then this is a hard pass for me. But if you want to roll in a piece of history, just remember, it's only original once, so find one that hasn't been butchered by time. Would you really want to spend your time in something that feels like a rolling museum of mediocrity? All right, folks, here we go with the engine of the 1968 Mercury Marquis. And let me tell you, this is where the rubber really meets the road. Or should I say, where the disappointment begins. Under the hood, you've got two engine options, and neither will exactly blow your socks off. First up, we have the so-called special 428 cubic inch V8. Now, before you get too excited, let's talk numbers. Approximately 340 horsepower gross. Sounds decent, right? But let's not forget the reality check. That's gross horsepower. When you factor in the real world, what you actually feel behind the wheel, that number drops. And torque? You're looking at around 462 pound-feet. Sure, it might sound powerful, but in a vehicle of this size and weight, it's just average at best. Now, if you opt for the special 390 cubic inch V8, you'll get a measly 265 horsepower. Really? In the malaise era, where power was already taking a nosedive, this engine is just another sad testament to the decline of American muscle. Torque is a bit better at 404 pound-feet, but let's be real. When you're behind the wheel of a full-size car like this, you expect a bit more growl and a lot less whimper. It's pathetic horsepower for a car that should be a statement on the road. And let's not gloss over the transmission. You've got a choice between the C6 automatic and, wait for it, the Turbo Hydromatic 400. Now, the C6 has its fans, but if you're serious about performance, you know the Turbo Hydromatic 400 is the best automatic transmission ever built. It's bulletproof, smooth, and has been the go-to choice for many performance enthusiasts. If you end up with the C6 in your Marquis, consider it a step down, a real kick in the gut. So, what's the takeaway here? You've got a couple of engines that sound good on paper but ultimately deliver a lackluster experience behind the wheel. For me, if I'm going to drop serious cash on a classic car, I need to feel that power and torque pushing me back into my seat, not dragging me down the road like a wounded elephant. It's just not cutting it, folks. Would I buy this car? Not a chance. The engine is where it all begins, and frankly, it's a letdown that leaves much to be desired. All right, folks, it's time to talk about the transmission and rear axle of the 1968 Mercury Marquis. Spoiler alert, things are about to get ugly. The transmission options for this beast included the C6 automatic transmission, a unit that's often heralded as a solid choice among the best automatic transmissions ever built. But let me tell you, if you're expecting the kind of performance that puts a grin on your face, you're going to be sorely disappointed. The C6 is a decent piece of engineering, sure, but when you stack it against the Turbo Hydromatic 400, it falls flat on its face. The Turbo Hydromatic is the gold standard, the holy grail of automatic transmissions, and it's a shame that Mercury didn't go all in on that front. The Ford C6 may have a reputation, but it's nothing more than a glorified boat anchor compared to its rivals. Now, the rear axle ratios for the Marquis were a pretty standard affair, offering either 2.80 to 1 or 3.0 to 1. Sure, you might think, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that these ratios are designed for cruising, not for excitement. You're not going to win any drag races with those numbers. The rear axle setups do nothing to help the already woeful performance of this car. The straight line speed is mediocre at best, with a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of around 8.5 seconds. That's not exactly what you'd call thrilling, and if you're thinking about pushing it to the limits, just forget it. The quarter-mile time of 16.5 seconds tells you everything you need to know about how this car performs under pressure. Let's not gloss over the mechanical weak points either. This car has a notorious reputation for power steering leaks and issues with the C6 transmission fluid lines. You think you're getting a classic ride, but what you're really getting is a headache waiting to happen. The aging wiring harnesses are another ticking time bomb, and if you're not careful, you might just find yourself stranded because of some shoddy electrical work. So, what do we have here? A transmission that's okay but pales in comparison to the best, a rear axle that's more about cruising than performance, and a collection of mechanical flaws that'll keep you up at night. For me, I wouldn't touch this car with a 10-foot pole unless it was in pristine condition and offered at a steal. And even then, I'd be looking over my shoulder for any signs of trouble. If you're in the market for a classic, just remember, the mechanics of the 1968 Mercury Marquis leave a lot to be desired. All right, gearheads, let's talk about the suspension, brakes, and handling of the 1968 Mercury Marquis. Buckle up because this ride is a mixed bag of nostalgia and sheer disappointment. First off, the suspension system is what you'd expect from a big American land yacht. A front independent suspension with coil springs and a rear leaf spring setup. Now that sounds great in theory, but don't be fooled. In practice, it's a bit of a letdown. These cars were built for comfort, which means they float down the road like a boat in a gentle sea. But you know what? That floating feeling turns into wallowing when you hit the corners. The handling? It's like trying to steer a school bus through a tight alleyway. Now let's dissect those brakes. Honestly, they're a bit of a tragedy. Drum brakes at the rear and power-assisted discs up front. So, what's the problem? You guessed it. Braking performance that feels like it's stuck in the malaise of the late 70s. Sure, they'll stop you eventually, but don't expect to win any races against modern cars. My biggest issue has always been the brakes on these old beasts. If you're cruising down the highway and need to slam on the brakes, you better hope you have a good set of seatbelts because it's going to be a wild ride. And speaking of wild rides, let's chat about the handling dynamics. Back in the day, cars like this had a certain finesse, an ability to dance through corners with grace. But by 1968, that finesse was slipping away faster than a greased pig at a county fair. The Marquis is no exception. The steering is vague, and the body roll is comically exaggerated. You might as well be piloting a ship instead of a car. Now you might think, hey, it's a classic. It's meant to be driven like a leisurely Sunday cruise. And you'd be right, up to a point. But for me, a classic car should still have some semblance of control and feedback. When you're behind the wheel of the Marquis, you're left yearning for the glory days of high-compression V8s and precise handling. It feels like a sad reminder that things used to be better. So, if you're considering picking up a 1968 Mercury Marquis, be prepared for a leisurely drive, not a spirited one. It's a car that embodies a bygone era, but it's also a car that makes you appreciate the advancements we've made in automotive engineering. If you want a classic with real road feel, you might want to keep looking. This one may not have the handling chops to keep you engaged. Now, let's talk about reliability, because if you're thinking of picking up a 1968 Mercury Marquis, you better be prepared for a few headaches. First off, rust is a massive issue. You'll find these beauties have a knack for developing rust in the trunk pan, lower quarter panels, and fender arches. If you spot any bubbling or flaking, consider it a huge red flag. For me, any sign of rust means I'm backing away slowly. No way am I diving into a money pit. The electrical systems are no cakewalk either. Those vacuum-operated headlamp doors, they're notorious for failing, and don't even get me started on the wiring harnesses that seem to age like milk. When it comes to performance, remember that while the 0 to 60 time of around 8.5 seconds might seem decent for a car of its size, it's a far cry from the muscle of yesteryear. The engine options might have looked good on paper with powerful numbers, but we're living in a malaise era where compression ratios are a pitiful 7.6 to 1. A car that should be roaring down the road instead wheezes like an asthmatic. In terms of driving experience, the Mercury Marquis has its moments, but you'll feel the weight of that big iron. It used to handle much, much better before it got swept up in the wave of mediocrity that hit in the late 70s. The steering feels heavy and the brakes are less than inspiring. Honestly, it's a bit of a chore to drive compared to its predecessors. So, what's the verdict? If you're lucky enough to find one in good condition, with minimal rust and all original parts, it could be worth considering. But at what cost? We're in a market where these once unloved beasts are fetching crazy prices, anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 at auction, depending on how well preserved they are. It's a classic case of brutal charm. What was once a car you could find in a junkyard is now a prized possession. Would I buy a 1968 Mercury Marquis? Honestly, if I found one with low mileage and in pristine condition, I might be tempted. But I'd have to be ready for the upkeep and the quirks that come with owning a classic. So here's my final thought. Despite all its flaws, if you can score one at a good price, and you have the time and resources to deal with its quirks, go for it. But remember, it's only original once, so don't fall for a repaint or a half-hearted restoration. Is it too yellow? Would you spend your money on this? If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give it a like. Leave your comments and impressions. Your opinion is very important to me. Until next time.